Welcome in. It is college football smothered and covered. A beautiful Tuesday here in Metro Atlanta, at least for the time being. Of course, Hurricane Debbie ravaging Florida into South Georgia, into South Carolina. So, hope you guys are staying safe out there. In here today, got a busy show. We're going to talk a little bit about coaches who could be fired. BetOnline has some interesting odds out on which coach will be fired first in college football. Some interesting names on that list, including one in Boulder, Colorado. We'll talk a little bit about that, what it means and how it could happen in this episode. And also, the coaches poll is out. Look, I like preseason top 25s. I think they're fun. I think that you do too, even if you say you don't. I guarantee you that you do, because it gives us a chance to argue, yell, scream, debate, all of those things. It's talking season, so it's just another part of talking. It's fuel additive to talking season, which is one of my favorite seasons, not just in college football, but also in sports, because anticipation is there. Everybody's excited about the season. So let's look at these odds. These are from BetOnline. The first head coach fired in college football. We'll talk a little bit about some of the others lately, but look all the way down at the bottom, right down there. You see me pointing. If you're listening, I am pointing at the bottom. Deion Sanders, 50-1 odds on getting fired first. Now, Deion has become the new Notre Dame. And the reason I say that is because you either love him in Colorado or you hate him in Colorado, and there's really no in between. And that's okay. Polarizing figures, polarizing teams are very good. We need these in sports, right? We saw it with the Patriots. We see it with the Yankees. We see it with all these teams, right? Alabama in college football. It's what makes the sport great, is that you have polarizing teams. Deion is polarizing partly because of just getting hired to begin with. Then the 3-0 start last year, every single casual jumped on board the hype train, and then Colorado regressed to what a lot of us thought it would be, and that's a mediocre Pac-12 team. Mediocre being a step up from god-awful. So Deion did take a step up. So what does he have to do record-wise to avoid getting fired? It's not about the record. It's about the culture. It's about being competitive. And it's about recruiting over the course of the next 3-4 months. So 50-1, like being on that list in general, is a little bit surprising, because Deion could go 4-8, and it might look a little different than last year, and that's progress. They go 6-6 and make a bowl game. You stand up, you applaud. That's fantastic work. So I understand a little bit why Deion is on this, though. And it's because of this. And this came out from Athlon Sports over the weekend. Deion Sanders' chaotic culture turns into locker room violence in Colorado. Coach Prime keeps it cool on the outside, but inside it seems to be boiling over. That, my friends, is what could get Deion fired. 4-8's 4-8, whatever, doesn't matter. But if that's correct, and the culture is a disaster, that's when Colorado's administrators are going to look each other in the eye and say, is this really worth it? Is this really worth it? I don't know if the answer is yes or no. But if you go read that story from Athlon Sports, you get a pretty good glimpse of some rumblings we've heard and favorites that are being played. And I'm talking about fights in the locker room. Cormani McClain specifically being a guy that Shiloh and Shador were extra hard on when he got there. Of course, Cormani McClain left. And just favorites being played by the coaching staff and Deion's two kids. And look, it's natural to love your children. But if you start putting them in positions where they have to play favorites and do your dirty work for you, which if you listen to this, or if you go read the story on Athlon, that's kind of what they're getting at, is that it's up to a specific group of people, not necessarily to haze. I think hazing is a little bit beyond what this is, but just to indoctrinate them into the Colorado lifestyle. That's not okay. You need leaders, but you don't need assholes. And so, look, if the story's right and the Sanders brothers are kind of leading a group of people who maybe go a little too far in terms of welcoming new people in, that means they're not getting proper direction from this guy, Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders. So, to me, that is why you see Deion at 50-1 on the Bet Online odds to get fired first. Honestly, 50-1, I might take that. Look, I'm not saying he will. But if a $1 bet nets me $50, that Athlon story might be right and the culture could collapse. And if it does, bam, he's gone. That seems like a pretty decent investment. But it doesn't really matter on the field. Like on the field for Deion, 4-8's fine. 4-8's fine. Look better doing it. 6-6, and you're riding high. But those odds depend heavily on what we saw over the weekend from Athlon. All right, let's look again at some of these names. Leading the charge, of course, is Billy Napier at 4-1. Now, I think with Billy Napier, of course, he is number one on this list. It has not worked well at Florida. They've been mediocre at best. The schedule is just an absolute nightmare. And there really isn't a lot to get hyped about. Montrell Johnson now has knee surgery. We talked about that on yesterday's episode. So it's hard to love the Gators. Ricky Pearsall's gone. I guess similar to Deion, it's not about the record necessarily. It's about what it looks like. Specifically, if you beat Miami in week 1 and UCF later in the season before the gauntlet happens. So it's not fair to put a number on Billy. 7-5 can look a lot of different ways, but it's more about the 5 losses, what they look like, and then does he manage the program better? Now, I've talked to a lot of people around the Florida program. A lot of people around the SEC feel the same way. People that know Billy, people that know Florida, people that know what it's like to operate a program. You have to have a business mindset. Kirby Smart had that. Nick Saban had that. You're the CEO. You trust your people, but you put them in line if they don't do what you ask them to do. Now, that's not necessarily firing people. You can do that. It's not necessarily firing people, but it's managing the organization. I don't think Billy Napier has done a good job of that. And I don't think he's put the people in place from a mindset attitude that can achieve the goals that he's set forth. But in the offseason, he's hired some dudes, some assistants who will put people in line, like Roberts, like a bunch of these other guys. That kind of edge didn't exist on Florida last year or the year before. So when you're talking about Billy being fired, yes, the schedule plays into it, but it's more about what that team looks like baked into that schedule. And if he looks like he's become more of a CEO, and I'm not talking about CEO on the football field side of it, letting your offensive coordinator coach, letting your defensive coordinator coach. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about from a business perspective, from an organizational chart perspective. Has Billy done enough? Has he changed? That ultimately is going to really determine if he is fired, and if he's the first one fired, like Bet Online's odds show at 4-1. Personally, to me, I don't think Florida would make a move early in the season. I think they'd probably wait until that gauntlet in November anyway. And there probably will be somebody who gets fired, maybe on this list, maybe not, earlier. So I don't necessarily think those are good odds. Now, again, this is not a list of coaches who will be fired. It's first. And I don't think Florida will cut bait that easy. Plus, Ben Sass retired. President retired. So there's a lot going on that would prevent that from happening at least early to mid-season. Now, when you're looking at this list, another one pops out, even with Justin Wilcox and Pat Narduzzi, is Ryan Day at Ohio State. I'm fascinated by the dynamics at play in Columbus right now. And there are a lot of them. Fascinated by this because we know what has happened against Michigan. Ryan Day has that monkey on his back now. He hasn't gotten it off his back, but yet he made the playoff 2 years ago. I think they were the second best team in the country 2 years ago, behind Georgia. And I don't think that gap was that big. But the Michigan thing is a problem. And now you throw in the wrinkle of the 12-team playoff. You throw in the possibility of playing Michigan 3 times. You throw in the possibility of making the playoff, winning a national championship, even if you get embarrassed by Michigan at the end of the regular season. So to me, 12-1, that there's so much nuance to this, right? So much nuance, because it'll come down to what the decision makers, and ultimately Ross Bjork, the new AD, puts emphasis on. Do you want to beat your rival? Yes, of course you do. Especially a rivalry as heated as this one. Do you want to win a national championship? Do you want to make a college football playoff? Do you want to make a Final Four? We shouldn't call it Final Four, but whatever we end up terming. Of course you want to make those. You can accomplish all of that and lose to Michigan, maybe twice in the regular season of the Big Ten championship game. Maybe you still get in and win a national championship. Even if you lose to Michigan twice, what does Ross Bjork put emphasis on? What do Ohio State boosters put emphasis on? Because if you're one of the 4 teams, you make the semifinal and you lose to whoever, Michigan's not a part of the Final Four. But if you make the Final Four, the semifinals, and you lose, but you've also lost to Michigan once, perhaps even twice, how do you view Ryan Day? The answer is I have no friggin' idea how you view Ryan Day. I have no clue. Because this dude will have done a lot of what you've asked. Put yourself in position to win a national championship, perhaps even win a national championship, even if you've lost to Michigan. What's more valuable? I think it's winning a national championship. I think a lot of other people will agree with me, but will everybody? No. Will people with the power of the purse at Ohio State agree with me? Some will, others might not. So I'm just fascinated by this entire thing. And I'll tell you, I filled out my helmet schedules game by game. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the summer. But here they are, game by game predictions for every team. And I'll tell you, I have Ohio State going to the playoff. I have Ohio State beating Michigan. So I'm of the belief that they can do both. But it is just a fascinating sort of confluence of events coinciding with the 12-team playoff. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see what happens. The problem, though, at 12-1, he's even with Cal's Justin Wilcox and Pittsburgh's Pat Narduzzi, and he's ahead of Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati, Tony Elliott at Virginia, even Shane Beamer at South Carolina. I'm fascinated with the story. I think it's going to be phenomenal to watch as the season goes on a week-by-week basis. But the value is not there. Flat up, straight up, the value is not there. Because, like we talked about, this is not who will be fired. It's who will be the first coach to be fired. So we're talking about an Ohio State team that eases into the season. The schedule's not that tough and doesn't really get into the part of the schedule that will dictate Ryan Day's future until the end of the regular season, or even beyond the end of the regular season. You're going to put him with Justin Wilcox and Pat Narduzzi ahead of Satterfield, ahead of Beamer, ahead of Tony Elliott. To me, this is just to get people talking about it. And look what we're doing here on College Football Smothered and Covered. We're talking about it. But again, look back here. If you're listening, I'm reaching behind me. Helmet schedules. There are wins and losses on every single part of this. Sorry, my son stole one of them. But every single team, every single game has a win or a loss next to it. I'll tell you what, there are a lot of W's on Ohio State's line. Are they all W's? We'll see. That will come later in the preseason. Speaking of preseason, hey, Coaches Poll. Yes, Coaches Poll. Preseason polls. Absolutely love these. Absolutely love these. And if you say you don't, you are a liar. If you say you don't like preseason polls, you are a liar. Now, no surprise at the top, for me anyway. And coach, look, the coaches poll is not as important as the AP poll because coaches just don't care. I know some SIDs do it, and that's true. More coaches fill this out than you think, and they're more concerned with their own team. So it's just they don't have the depth of maybe the AP voters. And I'm not saying the AP voters know what they're doing because some of them didn't play football, and I get that. But coaches care about themselves. They're worried about themselves. But no surprise, Georgia number 1, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3, Texas 4, Alabama, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, Florida State, Missouri, LSU, Utah, Clemson, Tennessee, Oklahoma, blah, 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 blah. So where are the surprises in this? I'm not that surprised about any of it. I disagree with a couple of these. But I'm not surprised that this is what it looks like. In fact, I mean, you could make it. If I was predicting the poll, this might be almost exactly what it looks like. I do love the fact that the coaches are giving Ole Miss some love at number 6. That's respect for Lane Kiffin. That's respect for the transfer portal. That's respect for the running back position at Ole Miss, specifically Bentley. And that is recognition that this Ole Miss team, they've gone all in. Lane has done a great job of building a roster that can contend right away, and that they understand that Lane knows that making a college football playoff in year 1 of the 12-team event would do wonders for a university. Basically, Lane bet on himself, and coaches recognize that Lane bet on himself and that he holds a very good hand. He's holding pocket queens. Maybe not that good. King Jack. He ain't holding bid slick. Doesn't have pocket rockets. But he's got a good one. He's got 2 face cards. Coaches recognize that. Now, LSU at 12 ahead of Tennessee. This is interesting to me with LSU at 12. I didn't think coaches, this is the one thing that I was surprised about. I didn't think coaches would give LSU more respect than Tennessee, more respect than some other teams in this poll. Utah, Clemson, even Oklahoma State. This is a ton of respect for Brian Kelly, B, respect for Blake Baker, and C, recognition that their defense can't be as bad as it possibly was. It's also respect for Garrett Nussmeier. But I wonder this, how many of these coaches or how many of these SIDs chose to treat this like a preseason poll of where they're at now or a predicted order of finish? Because honestly, I can't put LSU that high in my preseason poll. Like we're doing power rankings right now, or whatever you want to call them. I can't put LSU that high. Just can't. After the season, though, if you're doing predicted order of finish, when you factor in that schedule, I can absolutely make a case that LSU belongs there. In fact, I could make a case that they might even be top 10. It really isn't that hard to do. If you go look at their schedule, it really isn't that hard to find a way for them to be a top 10 team and a playoff team. Very, very easy to do. Man, look at the disrespect for USC. 23rd in the preseason poll. Lincoln Riley, boom, stock all the way down, all the way down. Even his coaches don't respect him anymore. That's how bad it has gotten for Lincoln Riley. That's what the general consensus is looking at X. I don't think X is real life. And if it is, I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to what USC actually is. I wouldn't even have him in my top 25. Not sure what to expect from Miller Moss. They don't have enough talent defensively, especially to have an 8 or 9 deep defensive line. In the Big Ten, you need that. In the SEC, you need that too. But obviously, they're in the Big Ten. And they don't tackle. They don't tackle. 23rd in the country? I don't know, man. They were 8-5 last year. That was with Caleb Williams. Are they going to get better? I don't see how that's possible. And I was joking when I was talking about the lack of respect for USC, because to me, this is them showing too much respect to USC. They're caring too much about that logo on the helmet than they are the fundamentals that are being practiced by the people wearing those helmets. That LSU USC game, man, in Vegas, I just talked about both of those teams. Referendum game on USC. If the Trojans don't tackle and if that Trojan defense fails, look out. You could be talking about a season that absolutely collapses. We're going to tie it back to the beginning of the show because Lincoln Riley's at 25-1. Again, first coach fired. That's not going to happen at 25-1. We talked about Deion, 50-1. Yeah, if that story about the culture is true, he could be gone really quickly. Lincoln Riley at 25-1. He's not going to be the first coach fired. But if they tank, if USC's sitting there at 7-5, which would be below its win total by a lot of outlets, could Lincoln be gone? Yeah, absolutely. He's not one of the first ones, but he's up there. Again, more helmet schedules. Where's Pac-12 in this? I don't know where Pac-12 is. Anyway, if you're listening, just ruffling paper behind under the microphone. If you're watching, I can tell you what, this call to tease is not looking good for USC in my game-by-game predictions. for the Big Ten. Last one in the top 25. Man, you're getting a lot of value on Oklahoma State. They are underrated. If you go look at any of these outlets, Oklahoma State's odds to win the Big 12 are significantly below Utah. I think coaches realize this is a Mike Gundy special right here. Veteran quarterback, best running back in the country, 435 returning offensive linemen, conference that doesn't include Oklahoma and Texas. This thing's shaping up well. I think at Oklahoma State at 18, coaches recognize, all right, may not be about the Jimmies or the X's or Jimmies and the Joes in Stillwater this year. It might actually be about the X's and the O's, because Mike Gundy has those. Poet, you didn't know it. I didn't know it. But I'm glad the coaches / SIDs, and again, more coaches voting than you realize, gave respect to the Pokes, because as of now, I have them as the number 4 seed in the college football playoff, as the 4th best conference champion. Subject to change, of course. We're still in the middle of fall camp, but I like a lot about what's going on in Stillwater. That will do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show. A lot of big things popping with this show. Lots of big things popping with this show. What happens on the writing side for me? A lot of stuff happening. There might be a lot of moving parts in a variety of different ways in my career over the course of the next all 3 weeks. All good things. All good things. But you will know sooner rather than later what's changing with the show. But I guarantee you, we will still be here. We will be providing you some of the best college football content out there. But again, I want you to follow everybody else too. I want 5 college football podcasts that you follow. 5. Pate, Staples, whoever. But this one needs to be part of it. You don't get served enough in this traditional media world. So where we are in the new media world, we actually provide you the content that you deserve. So please give us a follow, share this show with your friends, leave a review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, subscribe, notifications, all that stuff on YouTube and Rumble, do all that stuff. Like, let's be honest, I could go through the list of and all these YouTubers and podcasters do it. Like, hey, subscribe, follow, do checklist all the way down. If you're listening to this or you're watching this, you already know how to do it. So just do whatever you want to do in terms of following the show, but please share it. That's the most important thing. Until then, till tomorrow, have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon.